Some lights do not illuminate. They reveal how easily we wander. In low places where the ground forgets its shape, where water and earth trade places without warning, a small light appears, not bright enough to guide, not close enough to touch. It waits just beyond certainty, steady, patient, as if it has all the time in the world. Tonight, as sleep begins to take hold, we journey into the foggy space between folklore and fear. If you're listening tonight, whether from a quiet room, a late drive, or the edge of sleep itself, you're invited to share where you are listening from in the comments. These stories feel different when we know where they're being heard. And if this kind of quiet storytelling is something you return to, you're welcome to subscribe and join us again. Fairytales After Dark is made for nights like this. This is the tale of the will-o'-the-wisp, a wandering light seen for centuries along marsh and moor. A presence neither fully alive nor fully absent, leading not with intention but with indifference. Settle in, breathe deep, and let your thoughts drift into the unknown. Welcome to Fairytales After Dark. Long before roads were paved, before lamps marked safe passage, people crossed landscapes that shifted beneath their feet. Wet ground disguised as solid earth, fog that swallowed distance, night that erased landmarks without apology. In these places, light was trusted instinctively. Fire meant safety, lantern meant direction. A glow in the distance meant someone else was there. The will-o'-the-wisp looks like that promise. It appears as a small flame, a pale blue or yellow glow, sometimes steady, sometimes trembling slightly, never casting enough light to reveal the ground beneath it, always far enough away to require movement. It does not rush toward the traveler. It allows itself to be followed. In the oldest stories, the light does not speak, it does not beckon, it does not explain itself. It simply exists where paths are least reliable. At the edges of marshes, above bog water, near ditches and old roads, places where one wrong step is enough to lose direction. People gave it many names: jack-o'-lantern, friar's lantern, spooklight, corpse candle. Each name a way of naming the same unease. In some regions, the will-o'-the-wisp was said to be a spirit, the restless soul of someone who died without proper rites, or a trickster presence left behind when the boundary between worlds thinned too much. These lights were not evil. They were unresolved, caught between movement and stillness, between destination and wandering. In other regions, people said the light was natural, a flame born from decay, gases rising from wet ground, igniting softly, moving with the air, explaining the light without dismissing the fear. Both explanations lived comfortably beside one another. This mattered. The legend does not insist on belief, it insists on caution. A traveler walking at night might see the glow ahead, small, steady, familiar enough to trust. He steps off the known path. Just a little. The ground softens, the light drifts forward, never retreating, never arriving. The traveler follows because stopping feels worse than continuing. This is where the tragedy begins. Not because the light intends harm, but because following something uncertain feels easier than standing still in doubt. There is a human moment that repeats across these stories. A person pauses, unsure. The light flickers once, not inviting, not warning, simply present. The traveler makes a choice, and once that choice is made, the ground responds. Later, if the traveler escapes, the story is told quietly, not as terror, but as instruction. Do not follow what does not know where it is going. Do not trust guidance that never draws closer. Do not mistake movement for direction. The will-o'-the-wisp does not chase, it does not punish, it waits for attention, and attention is enough. Now, as your breathing slows, imagine a dark stretch of ground, mist rising low, the path narrowing beneath your feet. Ahead, a single point of light, hovering, still, neither approaching nor fading, waiting only to be noticed. The will-o'-the-wisp does not appear just anywhere. This is one of the oldest consistencies in the legend. It shows itself where the land is uncertain, where water hides beneath grass, where solid ground becomes suggestion. Marshes, bogs, fens, old roads that sink slowly back into earth. Places where the map promises stability but the body knows better. These are not accidents of geography, they are thresholds. In older folklore, thresholds were dangerous not because something waited to attack, but because they demanded attention. Crossing them required awareness. A misjudged step in a bog does not punish recklessness out of anger, it simply responds to it. The will-o'-the-wisp belongs to this logic. In some traditions, the light is said to be the spirit of the dead, not violent, not malicious, simply unsettled, souls that did not find rest, bound to places where life and death overlap too closely. Old burial grounds swallowed by wetland, travelers lost and never recovered, deaths that left no marker but memory. These spirits were not said to lure out of cruelty. They wandered because wandering was all that remained to them. The light was not a trap. It was residue. Other traditions tell the story differently. They speak of gases rising from decay, of phosphorescence born from rot, of cold flame igniting briefly and drifting with air currents. These explanations do not erase the myth. They sit beside it, explaining how the light moves without explaining why it unsettles. Both understandings survived because both felt true. A traveler does not need to know what the light is to know how it behaves. It never approaches directly. It never stays close enough to reach. It never moves fast enough to chase. It leads by allowing itself to be followed. There is a recurring human moment in these stories. A person traveling at night notices the glow ahead. At first, relief. The sense that someone else is present, that the night is not empty. The light feels purposeful simply because it exists. The traveler adjusts course slightly, stepping off the known path. Only a little. The light shifts forward in response. It does not retreat. It does not stop. It maintains distance. The traveler continues because turning back feels like surrender. Because standing still in uncertainty feels worse than moving toward something that at least appears consistent. This is how misdirection works. The will-o'-the-wisp does not lie. It does not promise safety. It does not say it knows the way. It simply occupies space convincingly enough that the traveler supplies the meaning themselves. In some stories, people follow the light for hours. The ground grows softer. The air grows colder. Sounds dampen. The world narrows to the glow ahead. When the light finally fades, it does so without warning, leaving the traveler alone in unfamiliar terrain, sometimes exhausted, sometimes injured, sometimes lost beyond recovery. In other stories, the traveler stops. They sense the wrongness early. They recognize the pattern. They refuse to follow something that does not acknowledge them. When they stop, the light drifts, slowly, indifferently, until it vanishes into fog or distance. The ground beneath them remains solid. The path reappears. Nothing dramatic happens. This distinction mattered in older tellings. Survival did not come from bravery. It came from restraint. The will-o'-the-wisp does not punish those who notice it. It punishes those who surrender judgment in exchange for certainty. Over time, the legend became instruction disguised as story. Do not trust a guide that never arrives. Do not follow what refuses to meet you halfway. Do not mistake persistence for purpose. The light appears most often in silence, not during storms, not amid noise. It favors still air, fog, quiet nights where distance collapses and depth becomes difficult to judge. These are conditions where human perception weakens naturally. The will-o'-the-wisp does not create confusion, it waits for it. Now, as your breathing settles into a slower rhythm, imagine standing at the edge of uncertain ground, the path behind you familiar, the land ahead indistinct, and somewhere forward, a small, steady glow, neither approaching nor fading, patient enough to let you decide. The most unsettling thing about the will-o'-the-wisp is not where it leads. It is why people follow. The light does not threaten. It does not rush. It does not close distance or demand trust. It simply remains visible. And visibility is often mistaken for guidance. In the old stories, travelers describe a subtle relief when they first notice the glow. Not because it promises safety, but because it breaks isolation. The night no longer feels empty. The darkness feels inhabited. That alone is enough to shift judgment. Humans are drawn to patterns, to movement, to continuity. A light that remains steady feels intentional even when it is not. The mind supplies purpose where none has been offered. The will-o'-the-wisp does nothing to correct this assumption. It does not need to. Once attention narrows, choice follows. In many accounts, the traveler knows something is wrong. The ground feels softer, the air colder, sound duller. But the light remains, and as long as it remains, stopping feels like giving up. Turning back feels like admitting error. Continuing feels active, decisive, safer, even when it is not. This is the quiet trap of the legend. The will-o'-the-wisp does not mislead by deception. It misleads by allowing momentum to replace judgment. Older tellings understood this instinctively. They framed the danger not as supernatural trickery, but as human certainty applied in the wrong place. The light becomes dangerous only when it is treated as an answer instead of a question. There is a human moment repeated across regions. A traveler stops, not because the light disappears, but because something inside them resists one more step. They stand still. The light continues ahead without acknowledging the pause. It does not turn. It does not wait. It simply proceeds. And in that moment, its indifference becomes visible. That is the turning point. Guidance that does not respond is not guidance. When the traveler turns away, the ground firms beneath their feet. The night widens again. The light drifts onward until it becomes indistinguishable from fog or distance. Nothing chases, nothing reacts. The danger dissolves not through victory, but through recognition. The will-o'-the-wisp teaches this quietly. It never forces belief. It allows assumption. This is why the legend persisted even as explanations multiplied. Whether spirit or flame, soul or gas, the behavior remained consistent. The lesson did not depend on belief in the supernatural. It depended on understanding misdirection. People living near marshes learned to read the land differently. They trusted weight, texture, sound, not appearance. They learned that solid ground announces itself, that safe paths respond to the body, that anything which refuses engagement should not be followed, that the light becomes a symbol not of evil, but of unresolved motion, something moving without destination, something present without responsibility, and that, more than danger, is what unsettles. Now, as the story deepens toward rest, let the image soften. The light remains, but it no longer feels urgent. It drifts, it fades, it loses authority when attention loosens. Some places do not forget how they were once crossed. Even when paths disappear, even when the ground is reshaped, even when the water is drawn away and the land is told to behave, the memory of movement remains. Marshes remember feet that tested them. Bogs remember weight. Old roads remember hesitation. Long after travelers stop passing through, these places retain a sense of waiting. The will-o'-the-wisp belongs to that waiting. It does not haunt ruins. It does not linger where people remain. It appears where attention has thinned, where use has faded, where certainty no longer presses itself into the land. In older countryside, these places were common. Edges between field and wet ground, ditches grown over with reed and grass, paths walked less each year until they existed mostly in habit and memory. The land did not erase them, it softened them. And in that softness, the light appeared, not often, not reliably, only enough to be noticed. Those who lived nearby learned to recognize the feeling before the sight, a subtle tightening of the air, a quiet that felt deliberate rather than empty, as though the night itself had paused, not to warn, but to observe. The light did not always mean danger. Sometimes it appeared to no one at all, hovering briefly, fading without consequence, as though the land itself was rehearsing an old gesture, remembering how it once marked its edges. This is why the will-o'-the-wisp cannot be fully claimed by explanation. If it were only spirit, it would demand belief. If it were only flame, it would demand proof. Instead, it exists in the space between noticing and naming, where meaning forms quietly, without instruction. People who encountered the light more than once spoke of it differently. Less fear, more familiarity. They learned its habits, its distance, its refusal to engage, and in learning these things, they learned how to ignore it. The light lost power when it lost novelty. It became part of the landscape. Another thing that existed without invitation, like fog that gathers without reason, or frost that settles without ceremony. This is the oldest fate of many legends, not disappearance, but integration. The will-o'-the-wisp does not need to vanish to stop being followed. It needs only to be understood as part of the night, not a message, not a guide, simply a presence. And once it becomes that, the urgency dissolves. The traveler stands still, the land steadies, the light continues on its quiet path, unconcerned, unchanged. Nothing is resolved, and nothing needs to be. The will-o'-the-wisp does not end with escape, it ends with release. In the older stories, the light does not vanish because it has been defeated, it fades because it has been understood. Once its indifference is recognized, once its refusal to respond becomes clear, it loses its authority. A thing does not need to be dangerous to stop being followed. It only needs to stop being believed. This is why the legend never resolves itself fully. The light may be a spirit. It may be flame. It may be memory rising from wet ground. None of these explanations cancel the others. The will-o'-the-wisp survives precisely because it does not settle into one shape. It remains a question, and questions do not need answers to remain powerful. In some traditions, people said the light still appear. Even now, in places that have changed, marsh drained, roads laid, towns expanded, the ground remembers what it once was. And sometimes, in fog or low light, something still glows where nothing should. Those who see it rarely speak of fear. They speak of hesitation, a pause, a recognition, a moment where the body remembers something older than instruction. Do not follow what does not know where it is going. This is not a lesson shouted, it is learned quietly. Over time, through repetition, through story, the will-o'-the-wisp never demands attention, it waits for it. And when attention loosens, when urgency fades, when certainty releases its grip, the light no longer holds meaning. It becomes simply another thing moving through the night, and then it disappears, not abruptly, not dramatically. It drifts, it dims, it dissolves into distance. The land remains. The path behind you feels solid again. The night widens. Sound returns to its proper place. Nothing rushes you forward. Nothing insists on being followed. The danger was never in the light itself, it was in the need for it. This is why the story lingers. Because everyone has followed something that did not wait. Because everyone has mistaken motion for direction. Because everyone has stood once at the edge of uncertain ground. The will-o'-the-wisp offers no condemnation for this. It simply exists long enough to be noticed. And then, when attention shifts, it releases its hold. Now, as your thoughts begin to loosen, allow the image to soften fully. The marsh grows still. Fog settles low. The glow recedes into memory. Nothing remains to be followed. The night is wide again. The ground is quiet. The path does not demand decision. There is no need to move. Settle in, breathe deep, and let your thoughts drift into the unknown. This has been Fairy Tales After Dark.